We acknowledge the land on which we gather, exchange ideas, and share our past, present, and future is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat people. Have you ever walked through a cemetery and wondered what stories it could be hiding? War gravestones can stir up emotions since we know the fabric of a family is forever changed by war. These headstones often function as cenotaphs. What is a cenotaph exactly? A cenotaph is an empty tomb erected in a cemetery or a public place to commemorate someone buried elsewhere. In the case of this cenotaph here in Old St. Francis Xavier Cemetery, it provides a stark reminder of the consequences of war. So Private William Baker was born on February 21, 1891. He was the son of Joseph and Mary Baker of 25 Georgina Street in Brockville. He worked as a machinist at the Canada Carriage Company before going off to war. What's interesting is we noted from his attestation papers that when he enlisted, he had a tattoo of a girl on his left forearm. So something that's kind of neat is that is actually recorded on attestation papers. So he enlisted in the 156th Canadian Expeditionary Force in 1916 and trained in Berryfield and in England. So he started out as a shell inspector, but was then transferred to the Canadian Forestry Corps in April of 1917. Baker was part of the Canadian Forestry Corps. So what did that mean? So there was a desperate need for timber to construct everything from trenches to railway lines to troop shelters to corduroy roads. And Britain thought it would be easier to bring over troops to cut down forests in Britain and France rather than ship timber across the ocean. So the CFC was farther from the front lines and they did not see direct combat but were under constant threat of air raids. So young Private Baker would have had to contend with back-breaking work. When supplies were urgently needed, the CFC would work 90 hours a week felling trees and hewing logs. So there were just as many casualties from saws and machinery accidents rather than air raids. What's another interesting thing to note, the CFC was comprised of marginalized Canadians, among them Black Canadians, Indigenous peoples, and other marginalized groups. It was also an ideal force for those who were deemed medically unfit by the service. For more records, it is stated that Baker later died of Hodgkin's disease rather than his wounds while in France. We can surmise that Baker was one of those deemed medically unfit, which may explain his transfer from the battalion to the Canadian Forestry Corps. While Private Baker is buried in France, this tombstone serves as a reminder of his sacrifice. Join me next time as we take another look at some of Brockville's fascinating history revealed through its cemeteries.